Look at that pretty shot of Washington.
Gorgeous.
Here with us now,
gorgeous.
editorial director of the Huffington Post Media Group and MSNBC political analyst Howard Feynman. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Mika.
And writer for the National Review, Charles Cooke.
I found out, Mika, I've got problems with Charles. Number one, Charles isn't wearing a scarf. I don't know why he's not wearing a scarf. Why is he not wearing a scarf? Number two, you're a Man U fan. How could that be? I'm a Liverpool fan. What's up? What's going on?
You didn't tell me that until just now.
What's going on?
My dad's from Manchester.
Well, that's no excuse to follow the evil
No,
empire.
that's loyalty.
But what's your excuse for Liverpool?
I was born there.
Okay, good.
I'm just making this stuff up now. It's a long story. I'll get into it later. So Charles, the Republican Party decides they're going to reboot. And God knows if any party ever needed rebooting, our party did. But I don't know. I looked at the press conference and I've read some of the documents and I'm left wondering whether these people get it. What was your take?
I think all parties do this when they lose.
Right.
It is obviously important to change.
Right.
The Democratic Party has changed a little as well. Clinton had to change in '92. But there is a risk of going overboard. You know, if you look back to 2004, the conventional wisdom was that the Democratic Party had to become the Republican Party. And the Republican Party now has an awful lot of people advising it, telling it what to do, who would like it to become the Democratic Party because they're not Republicans. So I think there's a degree to which the Republican Party has to be careful not to move with the wind and lose its soul. Having said that, there are obviously issues. There are obviously structural problems like the fact that young people don't like it generally.
A bad sign.
That's a big structure.
It's not a growth proposition.
You know.
Yeah, you know what else they did, Mika? They got the biggest bus they could find.
Yeah.
They drove it down the middle of the street, and right as the bus was passing,
Sure.
they pushed Michael Still under. And Michael's with us now. Michael, I find it interesting.
Okay?
You were blamed, despite the fact you were RNC chair when we made historic gains in 2010. What was your take on the document?
My take was that when I came in as national chairman in 2009, it was on the heels of having our clock cleaned in 2008 and having it cleaned again in 2006. I didn't need to spend $10 million to figure that out. The reality was what it was, and you come in and you put the boots on the ground, you go out and you talk to people directly, and you expose the party in a way that is not traditional. I argue taking the party outside of its comfort zone. A lot of members at the time thought that was a good idea until they realized this is going to require exposure on policy, exposure on principle, exposure on a lot of things that the party just didn't want to be exposed on, and that's what I take away from this report. There's still a lot of things that the party does not want to expose itself to. The words are nice.
Like what?
Well, the fact that you're really going to, how does Reince Priebus reconcile his approach and his agreement with voter registration policies that many in the black community view as anti-black, racist, whatever the term happens to be? You've got to reconcile how people feel about your policies, not just the fact that you're going to show up. You can show up anytime. It's what you say and what you do when you get there that matters most to people, which is why when in my first trip as national chairman was up here to New York to Harlem, we had 300 people show up for a town hall. You know what the question was from rank and file RNC members? Well, why are you going to Harlem? Well, that's where the votes are. That's where the people are.
Exactly. Howard Feynman, you had a horrible experience last night. You actually read the document. You said it reminded you of a term paper that a student didn't want to write. They just kept
really didn't want to write. They repeated the same non-statements over and over again.
What was the most telling non-statement?
Well, the non-statements were, first of all, they focused entirely on process and the driest aspects of process. We need to be better data miners, you know, as if data mining would really help. The data is very clear. People under 30 overwhelmingly support the Democratic Party or overwhelmingly oppose this Republican Party. It was an exercise in not talking about what the real issue is. And the real issue is, as I see it, that the libertarian part of the conservative movement / Republican Party and the evangelical part of the conservative movement / Republican Party, which were held together by Ronald Reagan and held together by fear of communism, are now at war with each other. The one honest paragraph in that whole report was the one in which they said that marriage equality is a gateway issue for young people. And if we don't change on that issue, we're never going to get to young people at all. That was the one paragraph that actually was a strong statement.
You know, it's so fascinating. You go back and read history. You lived it. But, you know, how old were you in 1964?
21.
21. So you remember this very well. Goldwater wins a historic landslide. Only
loses the landslide. Yeah. You said one.
I said Goldwater. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. LBJ wins a historic landslide. Greatest landslide since '36 when FDR beat Alf Landon. And boy, if you read Pearlstein's book, the reviews were just crushing. The Republican Party is dead. They have committed suicide. Much worse than what we're hearing here. 2 years later, the Republican Party has its best off-year election.
Now,
and we march on to victory.
Because reality changes. You have a Vietnam War going bad and generational and racial upheaval, which will change people's mind. Go back to 1989. Republicans have won 5 of the last 6 elections, 4 by landslides. They have an electoral lock on the country. They have California, Illinois, New Jersey, 5, 6 straight elections. They've got the South. They've got the West. The Democrats are done. Then Bill Clinton shows up and, importantly, challenges his own party on substance, not process. He says, we are brain dead. We've got to change on welfare. We've got to change on, let people know that we're tough on crime. He's a death penalty Democrat.
Right.
And now people are saying the Republican Party's dead.
But you know, Charles, 2 years after Bill Clinton won, said, we'll change politics forever. Republicans took over the House for the first time in a generation. My only point is, I'm all for the hand-wringing. Nobody's been more critical of the Republican Party than myself. But sometimes it just comes down to blocking and tackling, getting the best quarterback and getting guys and women that know how to block and tackle. And this campaign was run horrifically this past year.
Right, and if I could just play devil's advocate for a moment, I think the gay marriage as a gateway issue may well be true. But if you look at the country, we have to be careful not to pretend that the White House is America. That's a general conceit that we have, that the president is so powerful and he's so visible. But if you look at Congress, well, the Republicans did win Congress again. The Senate, the Democrats have, but it's not a huge majority. And if you look at the states, the Republican Party is very healthy. Also, some of their issues are very popular. Obamacare is still not a popular law.
So what's the difference between, on the state level, Republicans control 60% of the governor's houses. They have the majority of the state senators. They have the majority of the state legislatures. Why is it that there's such a disconnect between Republicans on the state level and Republicans in D.C.? Charles and then Howard.
Okay. I think it's probably easier the more local you get to see the efficacy of a political program. And it's very difficult for you to sell a program of we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. So I think it's probably a combination of it being easier to see, and there's a lot of money which comes from the federal government to people without it being of great cost to them or them noticing it very much. So it's easier to vote for largesse at the federal level, especially if you're not paying the taxes, because we still don't have the taxes that's paying for the spending.
Right.
You can't do that locally, you can't borrow.
Two quick things. Yes, the presidency is somewhat different, but this issue of marriage equality is moving so fast the Republicans have to get out of the way of it. If they don't, they're going to keep getting run over with the younger generation. The other issue is, at the state level, Republicans have to be pragmatic problem solvers. They can't take a philosophical stance against government because they have to run government. And then the efficacy of being smart in a conservative way about using government can show results, and that has shown results around the country. That's why Republican governors are pretty popular.
All right, Howard Feynman, Charles Cooke, thank you so much.
By the way,
have you on the show.
Howard came with his Louisville.
University of